Hello, Jivamukti here. Mike Ratner. It's my real name, MikeRatner.com, and known by several nicknames, which will make this an interesting podcast. So, Mike's Mastermind is really about, I guess, the thinking processes, things that are going on in my mind, but also with the group that I interact with. Yeah, it's not officially a real Think and Grow Rich mastermind, but I did start the Success Club back in the 90s, successclub.org. So, a little bit of backstory, I guess. I'm launching the podcast channel, so podcastchannel.com, and I need to have some content. So, I imagine in the future there'll be a lot of podcasters, new and experienced, to join the channel because it will offer some real advantages. So, in the meantime, creating some original content is key. So, why not start with myself? But in addition to that, I am currently hosting the 80spodcast.com if you're into the 80s. 80spodcast.com and several others, futurepodcast.com. We'll be starting couplespodcast.com, looking for hosts for other types of shows like streetpodcast.com, couplespodcast.com, teenagepodcast.com. That will be original shows that will appear on the podcast channel. So just the word, shout out, podcastchannel.com. So Mike's Mastermind, also a .com, really will become a sort of mastermind site. And in addition to my friends and closely held clients that I'm working with in a coaching capacity, you might find some interesting tidbits in this esoteric knowledge thing that I'm into, talking about social theories. And a few years ago, I completed my doctorate degree, out in Berkeley at the Western Institute for Social Research, wisr.edu. I always give a plug out to them. And that was a 10-year journey. And I wrote about community conversations, which is my graduate project and dissertation title, communityconversations.com. But it's really a lot more than that, although it's in depth to what really constitutes a community conversation, which is an intentional gathering. More likely like local invited, whether they're leaders or people who have an interest or responsibility engaging in certain aspects of their community. And it could be things related to legislation or just maybe what's going on within a school district, whatever it might be. And sometimes they're just open-ended community conversations that come together. You could check it out, communityconversations.com, a little bit there. But I love that aspect of it. So creating a dialogue, I describe it as a divine dialogue or a loving conversation, which is a book I'm writing, really adds measure and a qualitative standard to the engagement in which we hold conversations so that they're meaningful, substantive, and impactful, hopefully, moving towards the direction supporting a community that would lead to a conscious community conversation, upliftment, improvement in the community, and so forth, looking at a desirable, sustainable future and those desirable lifestyle qualities that we wish to engage and have for us and our children and our neighbors and the world over. So that's where I'm coming from. But as a social critic, I also talk about, on the other side, what I describe as the mass trance, like societal hypnosis. What's keeping us from having this quote-unquote shared enlightenment? And what can we do to propagate in a natural, inviting and welcoming setting that kind of enlightened engagement that expands our awareness? And I go into all that aspect and the different teachers, gurus, and people who have influenced me in that regard, expanding my thinking in this realm. So hopefully you'll find that interest. And for more information about me, myself, again, my real name is Mike Ratner, and that's my website, MikeRatner.com. Currently working on a number of projects. My priority is the podcast channel, but I'm also looking at these concepts. So community conversations and how we can help wake up and make people more aware, raise consciousness, right? And what's that all about? And what are we trying to avoid societally? So you'll see on my MikeRatner.com page, and I'm working on some books in that regard. In addition to Loving Conversations, Dashism, so replacing fascism, the F in that word with D. Still a failing grade, but not as bad as that could be. But what are we experiencing right now in society, and how can we become more aware of it so that we're masterful of our moments, so that we don't engage in the negativity or those things that are distracting, disorienting, disassociative. So there might be some proper context to where we disassociate, looking at where we want to go with our lives and our legacy, which is our input, and making a qualitative statement, whether it's in a community conversation or a contribution, and making that more meaningful is what this is all about. And I also have the domain social issues. So looking at developing that potentially as a podcast. A lot of ideas, and would love your input. And that's what this type of engagement is all about. So consider checking it out and spreading the word. If you love this type of podcast, then I'll continue to deliver the content while I promote my other ventures or yours. And I'll be hosting another podcast supporting brand new podcasts, and that's the domain brandnewpodcast.com. Thanks very much for tuning in.